I realized that when I started taking horn into context, like at jam sessions, I wasn't shaking at all. I didn't have any anxiety at all. And so then I would go back on stage and play the Tchaikovsky stuff, and now I'm shaking like a leaf. And I realize it's because I can't use my own voice in classical music. I cannot play ba-da-da-dee-da with inflections in it, because people are going to be like, whoa. That's not what's on the page. I love classical music. It makes me cry all the time, but I don't want to be in the symphony every single day of my life. I mean, like, of just a generation, like, you could be Lizzo with a French horn, which is what I want to be.
Welcome to the Holistic Horn Podcast. My name is Mars Gelfo. I'm originally from Florida, and I've lived all over the world, from 6 years playing in the Hong Kong Philharmonic and training Kung Fu, to studying permaculture in the jungles of Costa Rica and Hawaii. While living and performing in San Francisco, I founded a tech startup called Modacity and immersed myself in the world of Silicon Valley, which I think musicians can learn a lot from. This podcast is meant to feature incredible personalities from the horn and music world to provide actionable insights, inspiration, and thought-provoking ideas to help you live your best life as a musician and whole human. This episode features Shanyse Strickland. In fact, the horn playing and track that you're hearing is hers. It's called Horn Vibes, and you can find it on her website. She is a multi-instrumentalist, arranger and composer, educator, and overall musical innovator. I hope you have an open mind because we go really deep on this episode, talking about unconscious norms in the horn world, Shanyse's journey as a Black queer woman horn player, her favorite ways to meditate with the horn, and even the role that Cannabis has played in both of our musical journeys. Listen all the way to the end of the podcast to hear us trade improvised licks and discover the one improvisation trick that Shanyse feels can add color to any line. As always, show some love by hitting the like and subscribe buttons, and enjoy episode 3 of The Holistic Horn with Shanyse Strickland. Welcome to The Holistic Horn, Shanyse Strickland, the one and only.
Yeah.
So I remember my first find of you was just somehow the Facebook algorithms put you in front of me, and I don't remember quite what it was. It might have been a post about your embouchure. It might have been you sounding amazing on your horn. Just, you have this tone that I remember hearing your low horn in particular and just being like,
Yeah, that's my favorite place to play, man. I think I know what you're talking about. There was a discussion about high horn players and low horn players, and we're traditionally taught that, oh, you should be able to play all over the horn. But I'm like, it's okay if in certain ranges you got a little meat, like you gotta, it's something that just comes with ease for you. And I feel like you should play to the best of your ability. So if I'm playing fourth horn, I'm not like, oh no, I'm not playing principal, I'm not good enough. Like, it's nothing like that. I really excel in the lower range, and I'm okay with that. And I feel like it should be normalized that if you can scream your face off and sound good and play in tune, stay on first, stay on third. Or if it's the opposite, do the other stuff, So that, I think that's probably the first post possibly that, we kind of interacted without knowing that we were interacting.
Yeah, totally. And how did you get started with horn?
I started out as a flute player. I went to a really small school in Akron, Ohio. And the school wasn't small, but the music program was. And so my band director, who was a bassoon player, was like, hey, so we have 7 flutes and we don't have any French horns right now. So here's one of those little essential element books. I don't have any training in this instrument, so do what you can and try to figure it out. So I was self-taught for a really long time, all throughout high school. And then when I got to college, it was just like, you've been doing all this wrong. It was horrible. I had to start over, and the embouchure change, all that stuff. But the knowledge of the fingerings, the notes, the transpositions, that kind of stuff, that was still there. but it was just the formal training of getting all the technique. Like I had to like
Yeah.
start from scratch with that.
What was that like? Like who guided you first of all, and what did that journey look like to reinvent your embouchure and approach?
So William Slocum, he was like the one of the big. He's a big name in Cleveland, big name in New York Philharmonic. Just like he was like the grandpa, father figure, just an amazing human being. But I auditioned on flute when I got to undergrad at Youngstown State, and I was a flute major. I was like a jack of all trades,
Huh.
master of a few kind of thing, which is still kind of my thing to this day, actually. But I started out as a flute major, and then I also auditioned for the French horn studio. So my grandmother passed, and sometimes when you have somebody that's close to you that's connected to a certain instrument or a certain thing in your life, it's just like at the time I just started college, it was just too much. So I'm like, I need a change, I need something different. So I went up to him and I'm like, hey, so can I still study with you? And he was like, of course, like just like embrace me with open arms. So yeah, I had the whole 2/3 upper lip, 1/3 bottom lip, like that was flipped. So I kind of basically had a trumpet embouchure. So I was playing more with my bottom lip than the top lip. And so I had to switch that, and it was like a year and a half of sounding like a fifth grader. But
Mhm.
he believed in my musicality and everything like that. So over time, he kind of like got me in the right direction. And then I still had obstacles that I had to get over because, like, my high range, like you mentioned about my low range, the low range has always been natural.
Mhm.
But after that switch, I cannot play like anything above a G.
Mhm.
And so for a long time, I struggled with that. So it's like, it's now where I'm at now is like, it's amazing to me to see the growth
Yeah.
just after all the stuff that I had to go through with like switching and turning
Whew.
stuff around.
I feel you on that. I think
Yeah,
I've been through about four embouchures at this point.
man. Yeah,
I also really struggled above third space C even
really.
for most of my time. And it took me about 20 years and about $50,000 worth of like lessons, physiotherapy, yoga teacher training, shamanic work, hypnotherapy, chiropractic,
Oh
law of
my
attraction coaching,
goodness.
everything to finally get everything to click in my high range. And now I've got way up, high G above high C, high above high C without any
Yeah,
warm up, but it it took a long time to get there.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing though that you did all that work and all that training to get where you are though. It's the journey sometimes.
Yeah. I was so pissed off that I couldn't play high.
Yep. Felt. Same. Yep.
Yeah, which makes me kind of, want to jump into some of the spiritual aspects of, like you said, the journey. And I see it look I think it is a crown chakra symbol behind you. Is that right?
Yes, it is. It is. It's my one of my favorite colors. It has a little pink, little purple, but
Yeah.
yes, it's the crown chakra.
And I imagine you weren't born knowing what that was. So how did you get to having a crown chakra in your background today?
Well, I think I mentioned before we kind of started rolling that like I have a lot of anxiety. And so I didn't necessarily grow up in like a Christian kind of home or like, any connection to higher powers or anything like that. You kind of like say your prayers at night. You don't really know why. You're just kind of like, it's like a general like a slight introduction to a higher power, your higher self. And so throughout college I had what I would call like deafening anxiety. I mean, like,
Mm.
shaking on stage, like blacking out, like, and I mean, not just like in solo performances, but in quintet performances. Like I think the only context I felt comfortable was in like concert band or like really large ensembles. And so basically, yeah, like I had to start meditating and start
Mm.
finding other sources outside of the brief introduction to Christianity that I had to help me with my anxiety and to like keep me to be still and to sit in the space that I was in so that when I went into performance that I was not completely just going into fight or flight mode. A friend of mine introduced me to it, but just like getting in tune with your chakras and like trying to pinpoint where this anxiety was coming from. and like being connected with the different chakras that I had, and just like, different things like that. So to be honest, I'm not like super knowledgeable about it, but I knew it. I gained enough knowledge to keep my mind and my emotions at peace when I'm playing. So just, this crown chakra behind me, it's just like it's right above my bed. So like when I'm dreaming, when I'm in my natural and like peaceful state, it helps me a lot. And sometimes I'll just kind of lean up against it. I'll play horn. I'll meditate with my horn while I'm, just sitting in bed, like, so it's something that just a place of peace that I found that I needed, because I didn't want to like get on medication, and completely a fan of beta blockers. Sometimes in really high profile performances, I will take them, but I needed a deeper connection within myself.
Absolutely.
So that's how I kind of got onto that journey.
Yeah, yeah. I have so many curiosities emerging. I also, I'm not sure I want to go into beta blockers right now, but I also have found them beneficial in my life. And it was like, it was a bridge for me to be able to experience playing a high pressure situation without shaking. And then
Yeah.
my body was like, oh, that's what it's like not to completely freak out and lose fine motor control during a performance.
Yeah.
Oh, we could
Yeah.
do that,
Right.
you know? So
Exactly.
it was a little bit of a hack. I never wanted to rely on them. I did rely on them during my serious auditioning phase, but I'm grateful because I don't feel like I ever cheated anybody by showing up not debilitated by anxiety. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
And I always played well when I did get a job.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah. But let's leave that to the side. You mentioned meditating with your horn. That's something that I've done a lot of as well. Just it started with Alexander technique for me
Yeah.
almost 20 years ago. And they would say, just sit, and now we're going to put the instrument in your lap and see, just notice what changes. Does your breathing change? Does your posture change? Now just think about what it would be like to pick it up and play a note, and notice that little tension in the back of your neck, or the
Mm-hmm.
desire to pick it up, to do, right? Rather than just to
Yeah.
be.
Yes.
That's how it started. And then, God, I mean, I've sat psychedelic ceremonies with my horn.
Mm-hmm.
So to the whole gamut of really being with the instrument in different states of consciousness. And I'm curious what it's like for you when you meditate with your horn, what that's like, what you do.
So I'm a big incense person. I love good smells, and I thought that it was just like, I just like good smells. But actually, when I'm burning lavender incense, it like actually like just sets the atmosphere to be way more peaceful than it was if I'm just, I don't know, smelling the candles in my room or something. So that's usually the start. Sometimes I'll burn a little sage, especially like if I've been feeling like really heavy for whatever reason, just to like get some like good energy into the room and everything like that. I have to sit up straight, and then I'll cross my legs. Like I said, I'll just like sit on the bed. I just like to be comfortable. And then I just like playing open tones. There's something about me having to put any kind of pressure on the valves or anything like that that kind of distracts me a little bit. So sometimes I'll just be playing, in concert pitch, just like C arpeggios, like, but really just there's something just about the open note G for me that resonates through my entire body. Like I
Mhm.
can always feel it from head to toe.
Mhm.
So it'll just be just like, just me playing long tones. And it's funny you said like, like when you're thinking about Alexander technique and the different things that happens with your body, I do always have an urge at the very beginning of the session to start fine tuning things.
Mm.
Sometimes I won't play in tune perfectly as soon as I hit that G, just because, I probably didn't warm up or anything like that. Sometimes I don't do all that other extra stuff. I just want to sit with my instrument and just sit in the space. And so, like, my brain is like, you're like 5 cents sharp. You got to relax a little bit, or you
Mm.
need to fix that. And I'm like, no, because eventually, and I recorded myself doing this, eventually And it doesn't take long. It'll just all start to go in tune. So I'm just realizing that the more that I'm centered within myself, when I'm not thinking about other stuff, not what I'm going to eat for dinner later or what I have to do at work the next day, that everything ends up working. And it's also just like, talking about even deeper spiritual thing. It's just like, I feel like I found my purpose in being a musician and making music, because nothing else in my life resonates with such equilibrium that everything is just balanced and just naturally, without me making any effort, me just blowing into these metal tubes and everything just feeling perfect. I found my purpose. So many people are just like, why am I here?
Yeah.
What am I doing this for? And so it's just like, yeah, just thinking about this, I'm just like, man, like it's just so powerful to do that. And I try to encourage my students to do it, but they all just think I'm a weird hippie. So, it kind of goes out the window. But
Yeah.
no, it could be really powerful though, for sure.
When I'm working with clients, I often say, I know this is going to sound really woo-woo or really hippie, but just try and experiment with me, will you?
Of
Right.
course.
And then, okay, I'll try it. And then, oh my God, I just added a fifth to my range in 30 seconds. Like,
You
or
see?
wow, that worked. Huh.
Yep.
I
I
feel
love
like,
that reaction though from my students. It's
yeah,
like, oh, Miss Strickland, you're really weird. And I'm like, but do it. And they're like, I'm like, now who's the weird one, huh?
yeah. Well, let's talk about some norms in the horn world. I think that there's a lot of like unspoken, harmful, or let's just say like suboptimal
Yeah.
norms in the
Yeah.
horn world. And one of them, like you talked about playing in tune, that's according to sort of like some real external standard of what in tune
Yes.
means.
Absolutely.
Like if I pick up this horn right now and I play a note and I can play it in tune with myself or I can play it in tune with the
Right?
tuner. And there's a process of getting myself to be in tune with the tuner. That's when
Mm-hmm.
everything lines up. But I find very that there's a lot of like real restrictions and in the box thinking about what we can do on the horn.
Right. Right.
What are some norms that you feel maybe aren't even spoken aloud in the horn world that we should shine some light on?
Oh man, there's so many of them. I feel like, I don't know, some of them are just like social norms, or like, what looks good versus what is really good.
For
Like,
example,
standing when you're doing solo playing, like standing up in a performance. I've gotten like, well, it looks more clean. It looks more like you're on top of stuff. It looks more. No, it doesn't. You're just literally just standing up playing. And I mean, like, I play the horn off of the leg.
mhm.
So, there's no obstruction of my sound or anything like that happening. But just, I've had countless teachers be like, well, it just kind of looks like you're kind of like hanging out. And I'm like, it looks like I'm relaxed. Yes, that's what I should be. I should be relaxed. Whether I'm playing an intense Strauss or an intense Beethoven, it doesn't matter. So that's one of the things. And then just like you said, like with intonation, there are times where, man, being a musician is really complicated, because there are times where I'm like, okay, this open G, like I was speaking of earlier, resonates with me, and I'll still be in that very calm, meditative, relaxed state. But then when I go to a gig for a rehearsal, or a rehearsal for a gig, I mean, and I'm playing with these other horn players, you could tell that they're tuning to 440 all the time.
Mhm.
And so I'm a little off, and so I have to make that adjustment. And I mean, it's an easy adjustment when you've been an experienced professional musician. It's not that hard, but sometimes I'm like, it will mess with me a little bit, because I'm like, okay, I think I'm feeling like 438 today, but I cannot do that when I'm playing with other people.
Mhm. Mhm.
When I'm playing by myself, I'll record myself and say like, oh, like, like I was a little under, but it doesn't bother my ear. So sometimes I will have to, like, when I'm preparing for a gig or to play with other people, I have to get that tuner out and make sure that I'm playing at that frequency, or else like I will play in a different one and it won't be matching. And we have to
Mm.
match, unfortunately, but fortunately. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
I'm thinking of a motivational video that I listened to yesterday, and the guy was like, "It's hard to get up early, but it's hard to get up late too." It's
What?
like it's hard to play in tune, but it's hard to play out of tune as well. So let's pick the right hard. I mean,
You
in
know?
tune with the people that you're playing with, in resonance and harmony.
Yeah,
When you're playing by
yeah.
yourself, there's a different kind of frequency that you can be in tune with, whether it's your inner intonation or the environment intonation or just whatever the day calls, what the moment calls for.
Exactly. Or just the room. I mean, like right now I'm in my bedroom.
Hmm.
Probably not the best acoustics, like opposed to if I'm playing in a hall. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? So
Hmm.
like but I think it's again like it's so funny because I have a 9 to 5. Like I exist in the corporate world. I'm like a church administrator, and it's crazy how people don't understand all the things that musicians, especially professional musicians, have to all the tools we have to have. I have to adjust what frequency I'm on to be existing and playing with other people. That's a lot. But I've got it down to I know how to do it. I know how to switch and like go back and forth. So
Hmm.
it's a lot of stuff we gotta do, man. It's a
You
lot of
know,
stuff.
something that's coming to mind for me that I think is actually the root of a lot of performance anxiety, at least for me, is kind of the thought that it's not that you have to sound a particular way, that there's good sound
Yeah.
and there's bad sound, and that it's not
Yes.
okay ever, not even when you're warming up, to sound bad.
Right. Right. No, that's definitely a thing. And I mean, I appreciate your compliment about my tone, but like I've struggled with that, and honestly, I still struggle with it too. I don't think that I have a standard French horn sound. Like
Yeah.
I'm here basically in New Jersey, New York, and there's a sound. Sometimes, most people in New York play on triple horn, so you could say they're cheating a little bit. But they have a certain color and they have a certain tone. And mine just always seems darker than that. No matter what my hand position, it could just be the horn, but I've struggled with that, and it's just like you get really self-conscious, like, am I blending in with the section? But then it's
Mm.
like I'm totally blending in with the section. Like I can, when you hear the recordings back, it's like, okay, it's fine, but it's hard, like if you feel like you don't fit in that box, to try to fit in the box.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Because we want money, we want to get hired.
Yeah. And there are opportunities, that's another thing that kind of, it wasn't until I founded a startup in Silicon Valley that I realized I'd never really thought as an entrepreneur in the music world. I kind of had a late start to things. I did a cognitive science and computer science degree before I went to music school because I didn't get into music school for my first round of applications. And
Yeah.
then I finished my undergrad and I went to music school at Indiana, and I just kind of got indoctrinated into this belief that, well, you got to practice these excerpts and practice to get a classical sound, and you're going to win a job, or else you're not going to have a career. I mean, maybe you could play chamber music, or, maybe if you were amazing, you could be a Tuckwell and be a soloist and play more music by dead white guys and occasionally like a world premiere or something. But nobody said, yeah, if you set your mind to it, you could be a rock horn player. If you set your mind to it, you can be the Lindsey Sterling of the French horn, or the Julius Watkins. Even, I mean, look, that guy went to Juilliard, right,
Yeah.
and then total jazz history.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm still grieving that because I think that I've had a modicum of success in the classical world, but I don't actually. The more I get to know myself, the more I realize that's not actually my primary path as a musician.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
Mhm.
feel like I definitely can resonate with that because I was talking about Bill Slocum earlier, and he was just an amazing teacher and a person. But one of the things that I loved about him was like I told him, I'm like, well, throughout high school, I picked up all these instruments. So I played trumpet, I played trombone, tuba, a bunch of just brass and woodwinds kind of things. And definitely wouldn't say that I'm like, at gig level with like all of them. But it's like I've had the opportunity to like relate to these different instruments. And I know sometimes I've played different genres with these instruments. And so, as a horn player and as my horn teacher, I was like, so how do you feel about me taking this instrument into other genres? And he was completely supportive of it. Just like my teacher, Zach Smith of the PSO, when I was in grad school, like he was also supportive of it. So, it's just like, I think that the horn is definitely a chameleon-like instrument. It does not have to, we see it exist in a bunch of different areas in classical music, right? From the woodwind quintet to the brass quintet to the orchestra to the chamber. So, I think that it's a shame that people will, if you grew up loving country music, it's something that you connected to with, your family or somebody that you love. And then you get into classical music and it's like Brahms, Shostakovich, Tchaikovsky only. And it's just like, you're frowning at the country music that you grew up with, that you loved.
Yeah.
And like you said, like why wasn't there somebody, and no offense to the teachers that I've had, but they had been in orchestras for over 50 years at that point when I was studying with them. So you don't have somebody that's there to be like, hey, like of this generation, like you could be Lizzo with a French horn, which is what I want to be.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just like you can't, nobody's telling our students that, but like I'm the person that's trying to get people on that wave to say like, hey, you can do these other things with horn. You just have to be a good musician. You have to be a good instrumentalist first and then a good French horn player second.
Yeah, and that's the difference between as well like a scarcity mindset and abundance mindset. There's a lot of competition for these audition spots, and that leads to a scarcity mindset, but there's zero competition to be the best Shanyse Strickland that you can be, right?
Exactly.
There's to be the Lizzo of the horn or to be a country horn star. There's very little competition, endless room for innovation, fame, fortune. All you need these days is 1,000 fans paying $20 a week, and you're making $20 a month, and you're making $20,000 a month.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's not hard to find 1,000 fans these days on the internet.
No, it's not at all.
Yeah.
TikTok. Thanks to TikTok.
Yeah. It's like a 2 or 3 year process to get to that place, which is, shorter than a student might go through an undergrad and way shorter than it might take to win an audition. If you think about kind of the journey to success.
Oh, definitely. For sure.
So that's kind of a seed that I feel like planting or advocating for is for people to follow more of their kind of unique, innate, authentic expression as musical entrepreneurs on the horn.
And instead of being in these boxes that have been created from people who just didn't dream big enough.
Yeah.
Or just think outside of the box where this instrument can go and where it should be. It shouldn't have to be in one spot. Again, you should be that's my thing. You have to be a great musician and then a great instrumentalist second. But I have a certain hierarchy on the musician part because, I can't tell you how many times, and, these horn players will not be named, but, that have passed on jazz gigs to me. And these are charts that you're reading. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, but because it's in that style, oh man, I can't do this, and I'm like, dude, like you're missing out on money. You're missing out on connections. You're missing out on a different way to express your horn playing. Extended techniques is a thing like that happens in more modern classical music, but you never know when you're gonna need that, so it's just like, to pass on so many opportunities just because you're not familiar with the genre. I'll challenge them. I'm just like, well, you're a good musician, right? Well, of course I think I am. And I'm like, okay, so why can't you play this music? And it's okay if you're just like, I just don't want to. You know, if you don't want to, that's fine. But I'm just like, you're missing out on so many things. You don't have to like hip hop. You don't have to like rap. But something that as a musician that you should be able to identify is that the rhythmical integrity of hip hop is almost unmatchable by any other genre. The fact that these people can turn poetry into these rhythmic schemes that somebody would be playing on a snare drum or something like that, and just the pocket, the rhythmical integrity of it all. You know, it's just like, that's something that's important. That's something that you could take into Beethoven. When you're slowing down a phrase that shouldn't be slowed down. I mean, you know, it's just like, if you're a good musician, I feel like you should be able to listen to almost anything and grab some kind of musical tool from it. You know what I mean?
Find some merit, find some enjoyment, appreciation. Yeah. So a couple questions emerging, and maybe you can blend somehow the answers. The first question is, what makes a great musician to you? And then the second question is, what was it like to start to explore and dabble in different genres? You said you had a lot of support in that, and I'd love to hear more specifics about how you got outside the box a little bit.
Yeah, so my definition of a great musician is anything that is associated with music. They're able to, in some kind of capacity, emulate with the medium of their choice. So whether it be French horn, whether it be singing, you know, if you identify as a musician and you identify as a great one, then you should be able to do anything with it. You know, I think the post we were talking about earlier was on like a horn people page, and the politics with that stuff can get like really hairy and messy. And, you know, there are classical musicians who think that they could play a blues and bebop like it's nothing. And I'm like, if I wrote that down on a piece of paper, do you know how hard that would look? It would look like all the etudes and all the exercises that you've ever been doing, but like you have to transpose them in all 12 keys in under a minute. You know what I mean? So it's just like, all that being said is that I think that you should be a good musician is limitless. And, you know, you may not be able to master it the first time that you try to attempt the genre, but it's just, again, like the appreciation, trying to find some kind of merit in anything that you hear. So that's just kind of like I think that you should just be limitless to what you play. I want to hear you play Latin. I want to hear you play jazz, hip hop, R&B, classical, you know, all that stuff. It's just like, if we're going to be musicians, I want you to be able to do everything that you can on it. And again, not master it, but it's the knowledge of listening to a lot of music too. That's the main thing. I want to see or hear that you listen to all these different genres, and now you can put your own spin on it and recreate it in the way that is relatable to the people who know about that genre. So that's just like a personal goal of mine, but, you know, also just for musicians in general.
Yeah.
And so for your other question, so I started exploring, like trying to mix Western European classical instruments in other genres when I was like in high school. And it also introduced me to composing too, just because, you know, I was in marching band, play the mellophone, you know, but it's just like, you know, I wanna rock and roll all night. Like, we're playing these songs, or like, oh my gosh, I can't think of the other tune, but just like, you know, these very, what I would call like bland, kind of just like, yay, we're happy and we're in marching band. It wasn't relatable to me. So you know, my mom is like a very avid Prince fan. So like, there's a bunch of rock and roll happening in my house, like, you know, funk, gospel, R&B, all this other stuff. So I'm like, what if, you know, I could bring those things to these instruments? And I mean, and when I say Western European, just like all of them mostly are Western European, but I'm talking about like the oboe, like rocking it out on some like jazz solo, or like the horn, like, you know, I wanted the bassoon. like
Mm.
these non-traditional or these traditional instruments to be playing non-traditional genres.
Hmm.
So I started composing and arranging, hip hop tunes, R&B tunes in high school. And, I was kind of the cool kid in band because it's like, yes, finally something that we can relate to. And like,
Mm.
I'm old. So like, this is like the early 2000s. I know I'm not old. I'm like 30. But, so whatever's popular on the radio, like Lil Wayne, I did like a arrangement of one of his songs. It's just funny to think about now. But yeah, so I mean, like in high school, that's when I started. But in college, when I got to grad school, because I actually didn't really figure this out or like say like, oh, okay, I want to be a non-traditional horn player until I got to grad school. Because I'm like, okay, so what am I doing? What's gonna be next? Because I knew that I didn't want to just go out and audition for a bunch of orchestras. I did not want to be in the symphony. The culture, the elitism of classical music and just being in a symphony to me was just something that was not, it just wasn't something that I wanted to do. And while I had this urge to defy, I wanted to be the first Black woman to be the principal horn chair of the New York Philharmonic, like that would be awesome. But also I'm like, but that's actually not what I want to do. And so I started getting into jazz more, specifically on horn, like being in jazz band and everything like that. And, my colleagues are kind of like, I mean, like horn shouldn't really be in jazz. Like I definitely got some like backlash for it of just like,
Mm.
yeah, you're making it sound good, but like, how are you going to make money doing that? Like, no,
Mm.
like you yourself sound good on it, but trying to get an audience to appreciate it, it's like, there's a reason why they're not any jazz horn player. And I'm just like, Julius Watkins. And then they would listen to it and it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. But when people want to accept something, especially a new thing, either they're innovative and they like new stuff or they just don't want to like it. So it's
Yeah.
just like, again, my teachers always supportive, but colleagues are like, you
My
know.
whole insides like churn and contract a little bit hearing you describe that. It's like it's so frustrating.
Yeah, it is. Like
Oh
to not
man.
have your friends like be supportive. And of course, like my friends, some of my colleagues from back home in Ohio, my best friends, they're just like, hell yeah, like do it. Like
Mhm.
you can do all of this stuff. You're the person to do it. Go. But yeah, just like, just some of your colleagues that are in school are just like, And the other thing is that, I'm not like, when I say jazz, I'm not necessarily full blown jazz. Like I am definitely very neo soul, like smooth jazz, like a mixture of like R&B with like some jazz stuff. Like, the jazz people that know me, like, yeah, I'm not playing like Charlie Parker, giant
Right,
steps
right.
like at 30, like just like really fat. Like I'm not doing that, but the thing is that I'm making the horn sing in a way that a lot of people haven't done in the past. And so that's
Mm.
what kind of sets me apart from a lot of people. And it's like, if I go to a jam session, like I can hang, you know what I mean? Because
Hmm.
I've listened to this music, I've studied it too.
Mm.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool. I would love to hear about your practice. I'm curious, you mentioned sort of a almost like a fake aspiration to be the first Black principal horn woman of the New York Philharmonic. And I find myself curious about where that came from, that thought like, oh, I would love to like break through some limitation or something like that. Like, where did that, can you unpack that for me?
Yeah, yeah. I have been growing up, like I said, like small school in Akron, then even middle school, high school. I was always the only Black person playing the French horn. I had
Mm.
like other peers that were playing flute, clarinet, trombone. I feel like there are instruments that are in orchestras or bands that are very standard for like any demographic to play. But for some reason the French horn and the oboe or like bassoon, bass
Hmm.
clarinet, those are the very what I just classify as very European. Like everything's European, but that's very European. So it's just like, you know, there you're gonna see some black girls playing flute. You're gonna get to see some black girls playing clarinet, but not the French horn. And so, you know, I was just like, man, you know, of course, I was already thinking about jobs and money and all that other stuff, even when I was younger. And I'm like, okay, if I'm going to make a living doing this, I think I have a good shot. You know, I was a flute player, but I'm like, there are like 10 million flute players and maybe 500,000 really good horn players. So I have a better shot at doing this French horn thing than the flute thing. And so, you know, like, I'm like, and just because I started thinking about, you know, who I am as a person, I'm like, okay, I'm a woman, I'm black. At the time, I wasn't gay, but now I am gay. And so it's just like, you know, having all three of those things happening, I'm like, oh, definitely, like, somebody's gonna eat this up. Like, I'm gonna definitely be able to advance and things like that. But then just the culture of the classical music, it's turned me off. Like, I had this motivation of, I started to take the auditions and I was getting better at being in that environment, but it was actually part of my anxiety too. I realized that when I started taking horn into context, like at jam sessions, I wasn't shaking at all. I didn't have any anxiety at all. And so then I would go back on stage and play the Tchaikovsky stuff, and now I'm shaking like a leaf. And I realize, I'm like, it's because I can't use my own voice in classical music. I cannot play ba-da-da-dee-da with inflections in it, because people are going to be like, whoa, that's not what's on the page. You have to play what's on the page. And I feel so restricted by that. I'm like, at least with jazz, yeah, I can play what's on the page, but when it's my turn to solo, I can rip it. I can just start going off. I can think about the bad days that I've had or whatever I'm going through in my life right now and just literally just blow it all through my horn. I cannot do that in any classical context at all. And I mean, there's expression to be made in classical music. You know, people take risks with solos and stuff like that. Yeah, that's fine, but not in the way that I can express myself when I'm in that jazz, and I keep saying jazz, but it isn't, but anything that's non-traditional, anything that's not classical music, I just can't do it. So my dream quickly changed. It was like, you know, I want to be a groundbreaking trendsetter for, you know, all the black kids that, you know, ever wanted to be in the orchestra. And I'm like, that would be awesome. But also, I'm like, I feel like my soul is going to be lost if I try to like go on that path. It's just not it's not who I am. I love classical music. It makes me cry all the time, but I don't want to be in the symphony every single day of my life. Regardless of the salary, regardless of anything like that, I'm like, listen, I'll work my 9 to 5 and freelance and compose, and that's actually what I'm doing right now. And I'm making a living doing that, and I'm happy, you know, but I just was not going to be happy doing that. I'm like, you know, I'm going to let another black woman do that, but that's not my calling, you know?
Yeah, totally. It's like doing it just to be a black woman playing in the New York Phil is like not a great reason to do that. You should do it because your soul calls you, and that goes beyond any sort of race, gender, color, sexual orientation. It's like, what does your soul call you towards?
Exactly.
I found it really interesting, surprising, and delightful that you were like, okay, like, I'm queer, I'm a woman, I'm black. Someone's gonna eat this up. It wasn't like, oh, I'm so like disempowered or marginalized, I don't have any chance at all, which I can imagine why someone would think that as well. It's just like that was an interesting perspective. Was it always like that for you? Or, you know, what's it been like, sort of, at least demographically, being kind of on the outside of the norm for the horn?
I think like just like the social interactions have just been like weird for me, you know, like just going to gigs when Trump just got in office and like you are the only black person walking up in this rehearsal and people are just like, everything could just be so tense. You know what I mean? Like, cause it's like,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. It's always joke around with my colleagues. I'm like, when you're describing your black horn playing friend, just make sure you let people know that I'm like black, like nappy hair, like, what's up, y'all? Like, I am black, like black. And when I say black, I'm brown skin, there's no colorism going there. Like, I am authentically black. I'm authentically myself. So it's just the interactions have been weird. And, I've had, again, certain teachers, certain colleagues say like, well, go into rehearsal with your head down, like kind of just like, you don't want to be the person that
don't
is
rock
like
the boat. Yeah.
being too much. And I'm like, yeah, no, like, there's, of course, we all know that there's like hierarchy between the conductor and the rest of the players. But I'm like, so you're telling me that I have to submit to being possibly disrespected in front of everybody just because this conductor is in the position that they're in? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I've gotten into it with some conductors on certain, usually actually when I was in school more so, not necessarily professionally, but I pride myself in being this outspoken black person that now is also in this other marginalized group. So I'm just like, listen, orchestra, I'm actually doing y'all a fucking favor because I'm checking out all of the diversity boxes. You got, I'm a woman, I'm black, and I'm gay. It's just like, you should pay me more. I'm doing you a favor. Now you can say that your entire orchestra is very diverse, which is like definitely a joke in itself, because like all these orchestras will say that they have a bunch of diversity and there's 4 Asian people that are there and then the rest of them are white. And I'm like, that's not diversity at all.
Yeah, what would you like to see? Like, why do you think that is in this day and age? And what do you think is like a healthy evolution?
It's complicated for sure. I think that me being a black musician, I don't want to just check off the diversity box. If you want me in your group, I want it to be because you believe in my talent. That's really it. You don't necessarily have to be looking at my outsides or whatever, or like whatever category I go into. That's how I want it to be. And I think a lot of black musicians also want that. But also, just like, like these fellowships that exist, like the Pittsburgh Symphony, they have a fellowship where, you have to have some kind of African descent, you audition. So it's kind of like a fair thing, but also they're just like, okay, so we got one black person in the orchestra. So now, we support diversity. And so it's just like, I feel like it puts black people in a hard position to be like, well, I don't want to be like a cop out. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to pass up this opportunity because I think it's good for me in my career. But also we acknowledge the fact that, we know that you're just trying to play the diversity card.
Like being a token minority or something.
Yeah. I want there to be like more fairness across the board. Like, listen, I was at a point where I didn't know any black classical musicians at all. I thought that I was like this anomaly, and that's, goes into the, well, I'm black and a woman, and I'm playing the French horn, so it's going to be easy for me to get jobs. That is not true. The talent always should matter first, and sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't. But there are a pool of amazing black or some people that not even just black, but people of color, Latino, like, like age, just like there's a huge community of people of color that can play classical music at a very high caliber. And so, I got into a really heated discussion with one of my teachers about this politics stuff, and he said that, well, it's not my fault that there aren't enough they're not enough good black people or good enough people to be in these contexts. And I'm like, that's not true. There's so many people of color that can be on the same standards, if not higher, than some of these white musicians. But sometimes the audition process is just trash. Like, they don't even read the resumes, or they're only looking at the resumes and looking at the name. If you have like Shaniqua Johnson with, you know, this resume, and it's just like, okay, well, yeah, we know that she's black. And so, like, yeah, I mean, like, her resume kind of looks good on paper. So, like, yeah, well, we'll pass her through. But sometimes it's not like that.
Yeah.
So, I think basically all that to say is that it would be nice, and I hope that the future looks like more people of color being, and I mean, not just black, but, like, all different colors, all different races, all different genders, all different sexual orientations in the orchestra. And it's, like, based off of talent alone. Because it's like, you know, we're out there. It's just like that comment that my teacher made. Like, it still bothers me to this day. Because it's like, well, it's nobody's fault that these people just don't exist. And I'm like, but they do. They do.
Yeah. And
You
I
know?
think there's something around, you're saying the word talent, and it's taking me down a road of thinking about talented at what? And you mentioned how you don't feel like maybe the most naturally great fit at, say, Tchaikovsky, because your voice, it's very hard to get your voice fully into that music. And I personally have struggled with that as well. And so I think there's a part around widening the aperture of talent in orchestras and saying, like, wow, here's someone who plays amazing hip hop, gospel, you know, or country, EDM, improvisation.
Yeah.
They've got a voice and a talent that is incredible and applicable and could help reach new audiences as well, but maybe it's not for Tchaikovsky. So I don't know. There's just like a whole paradigm shift that I feel is kind of brewing, but not tangible yet.
Yeah, definitely. And just, I think that the thing is that the genre is just so limiting. Like, unless we can say, okay, Beethoven wrote piano on this page, but we're going to play it at 3/Fs. And that's the other thing is, like, the theory behind it is, like, finding the functionality for playing that thing at 3/Fs. Not just because you want it to be different, you know, but, like, completely changing what we thought these classical composers were going for and recreating something. Because I do honestly and truly believe, just because they were such great improvisers, that there is room for us to retell the story completely different. It might be, you know, we might have to completely rewrite it, which will take a lot of time, but the music and the substance that they intended to be there will still be there. And I think that I see this more because, like, I've started to compose, and just, like, man, the trippy stuff that you think about when you're composing, it's just like, you know, I have a feeling like I'm working on this horn sonata. It's for horn and piano, and I want it to be about depression. And so I'm like, you know, the different things of what key is it going to be in? Why is it going to be in that key? And, you know, there's going to be a section in it where I'm kind of emulating anxiety. And so, you know, what does my anxiety feel like? And how can I translate that into music? So that there's like a bunch of different, you know, we can't, unless you can go back in time. Some people can, you know, like, unless you can do that and actually ask Beethoven, like, what the hell were you thinking when you did this? It's like, we're going to have to try to come up with things on our own. And I mean, what better to do than in 2022, 2023, finding new innovative ways to recreate this music so that it's more applicable to more people and it's more relatable to more people, you know, and we can get, you know, the person that can play the hip hop, the EDM, the all that stuff, and find their voice to fit somewhere in there. Maybe we add an extra bass line to double an octave bass line that's already in the Beethoven concerto, or, you know, the symphony or whatever. Like, I mean, like, you know, there's different things that could happen. Or, you know, maybe we put a drum set player in the middle of the freaking orchestra, because there are so many groovy parts of Beethoven. And there's a guy that I follow. His name is he goes by That Cello Guy, and he made this TikTok. It's like, the way that you hear classical music, and it was like da dee da dee da 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 da, and then it's like the way that I hear it, and it was like the it was like this like beatboxing like super hard beat, and it's like, but I feel that, and that's the way that I hear it, and so it would be great if I can, the way that I hear classical music sometimes, if we could actually put that on stage. But it's like Beethoven with a click track? Absolutely not. That's like blasphemous,
I
But it'd be
feel
really cool.
inspired to experiment right now.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay, let's do it.
what can we do? So I'll kick things off
Okay.
in the spirit of courageous, vulnerable sharing.
Yes.
You talked about anxiety. Um, and something that I do is I share, I try to express my emotions. I've been through a number of like somatic trauma release trainings that have been profoundly helpful for me. And a lot of this started with hesitant attacks. Maybe I started stuttering around 2000 actually, year 2000, in my last year of high school. I like had this event that precipitated a hesitant attack, and it kind of stuck with me ever since then.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until like 2014 that I discovered, 2015, that I discovered this approach of actually letting the stutter play out, like fully express as a trauma reaction. And so I can probably demo this. If I let myself stutter, say on a C sharp or something, I can
Yeah,
really like
yeah.
let it stutter, like take as long as you want, body. You stutter as long as you want,
Right?
you know?
Yeah.
Um, and letting it play out actually kind of like drained the reaction out of my system.
Wow.
So I would do that before a concert if I had an entrance, say that C sharp, and just do it again. And then I've got it. I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
That's
a few of
awesome.
those. It's like, get that out of the way. Okay, I know how to do that. And
Right,
then what I
right.
want to do is just play
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it.
That's really
um,
cool.
yeah, so that led me to really start and to listen and to feel and connect certain realms of my being state with the horn, just allowing all this stuff to come out. And so then, a natural extension of that is like, I'm feeling sad right now. Well, what does that sound like? Something like that. I mean,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
you saw one of my angry videos on Facebook.
Yes, yes, that was awesome.
But yeah, you're talking about your sonata and capturing anxiety. Kind
Yeah,
of, it just made me think of that. And then there's this whole storytelling aspect of not just a static emotion, but the narrative arc of the human experience
exactly.
in music.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know what to ask you, but I wonder if we could just get you to play a little bit, because that'd be fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It was fun to go from pictures into something a little bit more.
Right,
Mm.
right.
So what like talk me through what goes through your mind or your heart or your being when you're playing just like that, like really easy.
I don't like I know that for singers cuz I do sing a little bit that flat keys for whatever reason are usually the ones that resonate the most. And so, E flat and or in horn pitch, but E flat and A flat are usually just my go-to keys. Like I said, when I'm meditating, because I don't want to add any fingers, it'll just be like that open G. But
Mhm.
yeah, like I think just now, you played like a little bit of a solo, and so I'm like, okay, like classical brain. But then I was just like, nah, man, I want to feel this, and so then that kind of translated into me staying in that same key. But then, just like playing these little R&B licks. Hopefully you can still hear me. Just like a bunch of like pentatonics, like
Mhm.
anybody that like my close friends that I jam with all the time, they said it's like this Shanyse language that that I've
Mm.
created, just because it'll have like little jazz inflections in there, but I don't know, like pentatonics are always my go-to,
Mm.
always, like
Mm.
either putting them in major or minor, but like it's always my go-to. And Charlie Parker said that you can do that over everything, so
Yep.
just in the right way, of course.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I studied this fractal music course in Costa Rica with this kind of
Wow.
weird genius. And it made a lot of sense, but basically he said, there's seven, of course, there's seven modes, and there's 12 total on the circle of fifths,
Right.
and there's five different pentatonic modes.
Mm-hmm.
So he was just like seven plus five is 12. He kind of charted this like, okay, the modes over here and the pentatonics over here. It's like the dark side of the moon, the pentatonics almost,
Wow. Really?
and
That's
just
interesting.
connected it across the circle of fifths and the 12 and the sacred geometry of everything. And it was like, blew my mind.
Yeah. that,
It's like, all
that
right.
sounds really trippy.
Yeah, it was cool. Um, man, I I feel like serenading you.
Do it.
Yeah,
I'm all here for it. I'm
yeah.
gonna just
Hearing you
relax
serenade
and
me for
let
a
you.
moment. I'm gonna serenade you. Let's see what comes out.
Yes. That was awesome. That's not. Oh my gosh! And when you were playing, I don't know what it is, but there's something about just having like a little chromatic inflection.
Hmm.
If I was ever teaching somebody how to solo or anything like that, it's just like having a note, but then like just for a split second going way, dway, like a little what, like
Hmm.
that. There's just so much feeling in that, and it's very minute, but
Hmm.
there's so much feeling in it. Like you were playing like all these like a bunch of different just like arpeggiated things, and then there was one landing where you went boy, and I was like, oh. That's what gives you the jazz face to be like, oh,
Yeah, you
yeah, that's
inspired that
it.
one for me when I was listening to you. I loved. I was like almost cracked up watching you like spark a bowl while we're.
Yeah.
All
I
right,
was
how
just
long
like,
is this concert gonna be?
let me get into this. Listen, I'm ready to relax and get serenaded. Okay?
Wow. Okay, I've so sad that I have to go in a few minutes, but let's talk about cannabis and horn playing as kind of our final
Yeah, I was
topic.
gonna say I'm gonna hit this one more
Yeah.
time. I'm ready to get into it.
I remember when Elon Musk was on Joe Rogan
Oh
smoking
man, yeah.
weed.
Yeah.
It's so polarizing and yeah, I think that that's okay to have these kind of top conversations and topics out in public for folks to actually have different opinions about. But let's start with your opinion if you're willing to share. Cannabis and
Yeah.
horn playing, cannabis and music, cannabis and life.
Like I said earlier, I have suffered from anxiety for a really long time, for probably as long as I can remember. And, I was a very good girl in high school and all that other stuff. So I didn't actually start smoking till I was around like 25. So, I was responsible. You should be responsible. But, it's been part of my life for some time now, and it's gotten me through some hard times. I'm not a person that has a big temper, but I am a person that has a short temper. So, like, there have been times where I'm playing the horn and that high C will just not come out. And I want to throw my horn out of the window. And that's like, I'm being dramatic. But, it's just like, you get so frustrated sometimes, and then relax, smoke a bowl, breathe, drink some water, and then I go right back to it. And
Hmm.
then it's like the certain things, and now I'm getting like really trippy hippie here, but it just opens my mind in talking about the Alexander technique. I mean, like, you can do that Alexander technique when you're not high, but I realize that I'm more in tune with everything that's happening with my body when I am under the influence. And so some of my greatest epiphanies have happened when I was high and I was playing horn.
Yep.
That's the thing. I'm
Yeah.
just like, man, like, why? Like, I'll like just like, randomly go to the mirror and I'm playing this high C and my shoulders are all the way up here. And I'm like, dude, why are you doing that? And so then I'm just like, let's bring it down, play it, and then it's good. So
Yeah.
I think that it is, I mean, it's always been something that even before I smoked that I was like, no, people like to shame people who get high and stuff like that. I found a way to be productive if I'm high or if I'm not. So that's the
Mm.
thing. Like, I think the thing is like the productivity that you can still encompass while being high. That's what people just like, associate cannabis with, like stoners who are eating
Mm.
Cheetos all day on their couch and,
Yeah. Such a
pizza.
stereotype.
And you know what I mean? And it's not
Yeah.
that at all. It's not that at all. And I've gotten to the point where I can smoke and like be very functional to the point where you can't tell if I'm high. I don't
Hmm.
have the bloodshot red eyes and I'm not like,
Hmm.
hey man. It's just like, normal everyday Shanyse. I'm just a little bit calmer and
Yeah.
just takes off the edge. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like, I think that it's, like I said, I've reached some of my greatest epiphanies in horn playing when I've been high,
Hmm.
and I haven't let it stop my everyday life or get to the point where I'm not being productive with it. So those are the most important things to me.
Yeah, sounds like a healthy relationship. And cannabis is, for listeners, cannabis is legal where Shanice is, and cannabis is most
Yes.
likely legal where you are these days with Delta 8,
Yep.
or other options. And I also have had a number of my biggest epiphanies and compounding epiphanies with
Yeah.
the help of cannabis as an ally. And in particular, I think during some of my more stressful years when I was really hitting the horn hard, really coming up against my walls and my blocks, wanting
Yeah.
to get to the next level, that it was a big ally for me, both in opening my perceptions of myself and then also opening my perceptions of music and emotion and connecting to
Yeah.
all of that realm.
Definitely. And I
Yeah.
mean, for me, I'm already a deep thinker. I
Mhm.
already,
Mhm.
but I think that with cannabis, I come to these epiphanies and I just think about all this stuff. And I think it's for me to be reflective of who I am as a person. it definitely helps me to see certain things. And, you know, it's amazing how many people can walk around their everyday lives not taking accountability for who they are, taking
Mm,
accountability for their actions, thinking about how they make other people feel. I mean, I'm an empath, so I can't ignore how I make somebody else feel.
yeah.
But when I'm under the influence, it makes me really think about it. And it's like, well, you know, Shanyse, that wasn't really the best thing to do. And I'm like, yeah, no, you know, so it's just like
Yeah, you're more
these
aware.
internal, you know, right,
Yeah.
like these internal conversations that you can have with yourself is just like, yeah, I think it's just really beneficial just for everyday life in general.
Yeah, yeah. That's super interesting. I personally, I sort of had, a peak cannabis time in my life when it really
Mm-hmm.
served, and then it didn't serve for a while. And
Right.
these days, like I have my other paths to consciousness, elevation, breath work, meditation, and like my tantra practice as well. And so I don't use cannabis anymore, but I feel like it gave me such a gift
Yeah.
of connection that that gift will never go away. And for anybody who is on the fence about whether it might give them some new insights onto horn playing, I would say, yeah, if you're able to engage with it responsibly, like why not, right?
Exactly. And, you know, ironically, I do have asthma, but
Mm,
it's not as severe as it was when I was younger. So, you know, if you don't want to smoke, there are edibles and oils
yeah,
and things like that. Because I know that the smoking part is a big turnoff for some people. So,
sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, our lungs are our
yeah,
precious,
we kind of need
precious
them, right?
lungs. Yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
that's a good point. Oh, I wish we could talk about this a little bit more and unpack some of the nuances, but sadly, I've got a client to get to. I know you're reachable at shanicestrickland.com. I'll put a link down there if folks want to get in
Awesome.
touch for a lesson or I know you've got some cool music up there. And
Mm-hmm.
then you've got the Black Rosies.
Yeah, yeah, this new duo with me and Teresa May. She's a trumpet player from Cleveland, Ohio. So we're gonna be going on some tour dates soon. So, you know, I might be at a college near somebody at some point.
Where can people find that info?
It's Kent State University. So
Okay,
they have a site. It's Kent State University's website.
beautiful. All right. Well, thank you so much, Shanice. It was such a pleasure to spend some time with you.
Thank you. No, this was a great, oh, such a good conversation. Thanks for having me.